Good morning, everybody. So, on this lovely morning, we are going to be doing a set of struts and a steering rack and pinion on this 2013 Chevy Traverse. I'm going to go ahead and switch over, start getting everything prepared, and we'll take you step by step through the process. Stay tuned. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is you're gonna pull this cover, this big cover, which is held in by, starting over here in the corner, one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Nope, that one's empty. And 10 push tabs. So we'll go ahead and pop all those tabs out and we'll get that off and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so once you have all your pull tabs out and everything, this thing should just flop right up out of there. On the ends here, these will be clipped into these, or they'll just pull out with the rubber. That's on both sides. So there we go. Yeah, it should come out like that, but it didn't. So, but anyways, once you get that undone, you're gonna take that, just kind of stick it off to the side. There we go. Now you're able to take your ground lug off, which that is a 15. So go ahead and take your ground lug off. I'm not going to do it on here because it's too loud. Take your ground lug off, then you're going to move to popping the caps on your windshield wipers, and then we'll move to pulling 1, 2, 3, 4 push tabs for the cowl, and we'll do this step by step, but just to give you a future of what we're doing. Okay, so I went ahead and went through and I pulled out each one of the push tabs on here, and I went ahead and pulled the covers off of the nuts for the wipers. So what we're going to do is, see if I can't set you guys. Nope, of course not. I'm still working on trying. I've got a mount ordered, so it should be here pretty quick. Let's see. Nope. So was that? Oh, it's a 14. Of course. So those are going to be 15s as well. So there's 1 and 2. Okay. So we'll take those, set those over with the pile. And then these ones are actually really simple to get off of here. I want to set the hood down so I can get a better hold on it, and then I'll explain to you how to take these out. Okay, so the normal way I usually do it didn't want to work, and this is if you don't have a wiper puller or anything like that. I usually take my giant hammer and put the nut back on, then you'll take and you'll tap it a couple times. Same with this one. And then should be able to. Okay, so my puller would not fit, and I was actually able to get them to come loose with the last method. Really all you have to do is reach in, grab, and pull up to put tension upwards on it. And when you put tension upwards, then you can take your hammer and tap it fairly hard, and you'll feel it when it breaks loose because it'll jolt on you. So I'm gonna get these out of the way, and then we'll move on to pulling that top cowl. Okay, so once you get all of that done, you get your cowling off. It will be tight because it's been sitting there for a while, but once you get that off, then down under here you have your 3 bolts, or your 3 nuts and studs. Okay, do not undo those until you get everything from under here in the wheel well done, because if you undo those and you go to lift the vehicle up, the thing's going to sag and then things might break. So now that we've got this open and accessible, I'm going to go ahead and lift it up, and we'll get the front tires off, and we'll start disconnecting everything to get the struts swapped out. And in the process, we'll also start planning everything for the rack and pinion to come out too. So stay tuned. Alright, so once you have it up in the air, to get these out, you're going to need a 22 socket or standard, was it 7/8, I believe, or 11/16. But you'll have your 22, you'll take all 6 bolts out on both sides, or if you're doing this one side at a time, then one side at a time. But I'm going to go ahead and get the lugs off, and we'll set the tire off to the side, and then I'll show you what to do next. So once you have your tire off, you have an 18 nut on here for your sway bar link. I would recommend, if these even look bad, just replace them, because if not, you're going to have an annoying clunk. But 18 on there. You have a 21 nut, or a 21 nut here for your tie rod, and then these are 15/16 or 24s for your nuts here. These should not turn because they should just be pressed in to where you can just knock them out with a hammer. And then obviously your caliper bracket is going to be 13. So you take your caliper bracket off, lay it off to the side, use a bungee cord and hold it up. Then you're going to take off your tie rod, so you can move this in and out, back and forth. And then we will go ahead and take out the tire, or the sway bar link, which if you go to take this out and it keeps spinning, a pair of vice grips on the back side will help. And then we obviously undo our wiring right here, so that way none of that gets pinched or caught or torn up. And then you got to go through the whole ordeal of replacing the hub bearing. So we will go ahead, and I'm going to get the tie rod off old school way, and then we'll start taking off the nuts, or the nuts for this, for your mount. And then we'll take this off, and if it doesn't come off, then I'll show you the vice grip deal to get those out of there. So stay tuned. Okay, so unfortunately it did not come out with just trying to undo it. So on the back side here, I took the vice grips, and there's a flat spot of the rod that comes through here, the nut, bolt, whatever you want to call it. And so it's clamped on there nice and tight. Sometimes it will slip off. Oh, this freaking highway. Sometimes it'll slip off, but you just got to keep reattaching it. Or you can do it the other way, which is you find whatever fits on the end of here, It's whatever size, I don't freaking know. And then you can wrench it out by hand, which takes forever. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do it this way because it's a whole lot easier. But anyways, you get that clamped on there, and you take your 18 and zip it off. So I'm gonna get that off of there. I already got the nut on there off, and both the nuts on that off. So we'll move to removing the sway bar link, and then we'll bring you back. Okay, so here's a better view, so that way you can understand what I was talking about. It's almost like a built-in washer. So it's where the mating surface hooks onto the back of the strut. So basically you just clamp your vice grips around that, and then thankfully, since this one's been leaking, it's lubricated it and kept it clean, so it just come right off of there. So now that we've got that off and out of the way, then I'm going to take the caliper off, set it off to the side, and hook it up with a bungee cord so it doesn't stretch the line. And we'll move on to knocking these studs out, and then we can move up top and remove the bolts up top. So okay, so after smashing this living out of your finger, you're gonna take and get that off of there. I already showed you that. You'll take and get your tie rod out. These tie rods you can actually hit on the bottom, this style, because that sticks out a little further down on the bottom. But once you get that out, then slide it off to the side. You'll be able to move your knuckle off to the side. But you'll take a hammer and you'll punch out both of these. If you have a different style of stud that does not have the point on it, be very careful. If you need to, go ahead and take your nut, put your nut back on there just a little bit, and hit the nut instead of hitting the bolt or the stud. So anyways, now that we've got that off, we've got the caliper off, your brake pads, if they still have the stock clips, the holders, then your pads should stay in there, no problem. If not, take them off, set them off to the side, make sure they don't get dirty. So another thing you can do is you can undo your axle nut, so that way you're not pulling on the axle. But I've done it just like this every time and never had an issue, so knock on wood, thank God. But now that we've got all that done, we can move to the top, and we can be able to pull the nuts off of the top up in there to let this come down. So I'm gonna go ahead and let the vehicle down a little bit so I can get to those, and we'll get those started. Okay, so once you have it down closer to the ground where you can get up here and undo your three nuts, they are 15s on this one. I don't know what they'll be on yours, so they could be a different size. So but for this, they are 15s. I'm gonna go ahead. Biggest thing you want to remember is reach down here, and you're gonna take and you're gonna hold on to this coil. Once you get these undone, I mean get a hold on it, so that way when it lets go, it's not gonna fall straight onto your toes or onto the ground or something. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these 3 nuts out, and then we'll move on to getting the new ones stuck in there. Okay, so now that you got the 3 nuts out, you got that drop down on the ground. Biggest thing is when you're bringing it out, make sure you don't get caught up in your wiring. You go ripping that out, and again, you'll have to get it fixed. So, but now that that's out, you can, for definitive, make sure that everything is the same, which generally they are, because on these they make them universal for everything. So go ahead and take the nuts off of the new one. You can use the ones off of the new one, or you can use the old ones for these. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So set all that up there. You can grab whichever set you want to. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna tell you the new set could possibly change size. If it does, not a big deal. Just grab another socket, but double check and make sure. So we're gonna get the new one set up in there and get the nuts started, and then we'll tighten everything down. We'll start putting this side back together, minus the tie rod. So welcome back, everybody. So in the last video I explained how to replace the struts on this 2013 Chevy Traverse. In this video I'm going to show you how to replace the steering rack and pinion. So stay tuned and I'll take you step by step on how to do that. Okay, so once you get that done, you got it set back in there. You gotta finagle this knuckle back in between there. Push your bottom one in first, because it's gonna be a whole lot easier. Get your bottom one in first, then put your top one in, or however you want to do it. It doesn't matter. Then you'll get that slid in, get the nut put on it, put your nuts on these. For those who are just doing the strut assembly, then you'll take your tie rod, set your tie rod in, and then you'll grab a bar and push down on it, and then you can run your nut up. And then tighten down the rest of everything, put your caliper back on, tighten it down, put your wheel on, and then same thing on the other side. For those who are doing the rack and pinion, then we'll take you through that, and I will probably actually just make a separate video about that. Make it a whole lot easier for everybody, so that way it's not confusing. So basically at this point, I mean, that's how you replace the strut. It's the same thing on both sides. Like I said, all you have to do is just tighten everything back down. Make sure you get it as tight as you can on your studs here, and then, you know, make sure that everything gets nice and tight. Don't cross your thread on here, because then you got to replace it. It's a pain. So for those who are here for just the strut assembly, I appreciate the time you took to watch my videos. If you can, like and subscribe. And I put out videos, at least I try to put a video out every day, because of course I do this for a living, so I mean I do stuff like this every day. But I appreciate everything you guys have done. I appreciate the likes, the follows, everything like that. So hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Okay, so biggest thing you want to remember when doing this is you want your steering wheel straight. So the way I keep it straight is I put the seat belt around it and push the seat back so it holds on to it. Once you get that done, then try not to fall. You will get it raised up. You'll get your tires off, 22 millimeter for the lugs. Then you take the tie rods off, which are 21 millimeters. I take them off old school way, which is you just take a hammer and smack it right here, and it pops out. With this style, you can smack it on the bottom after a couple of taps on the side, and it should pop right out. But there's always that chance where it won't. So, but now we've got the tie rods out. Biggest thing you want to do first, after you get the nut off of there, is before you take it out of the cradle, you want to break this loose. So I'm gonna go get the wrench for that, and we'll get those knocked loose. Okay, so once you get your wrench, these are 24s or 15/16. Once you get that done, this driver's side is going to loosen downwards, so you're going to spin it backwards. Don't spin it too far, because you want to make sure that you're as close to the alignment mark as you possibly can be. This is just so that way when you take the rack out, it makes it a whole lot easier to be able to get everything lined up with the new rack when you put the new rack in. So, but we're going to go ahead and attempt to get this to come off. So I'm going to undo this one. You might have to spray it with penetrating or WD-40 or whatever it is, which I found out a really cool fact about WD-40. I wanted to spread this out. WD-40, the main ingredient in that is actually fish oil. You can use WD-40 for darn near everything. So you get a chance, look that up. Look up WD-40 and see what they tell you about it. So it's actually, facts are pretty interesting. So but I'm gonna go ahead and get this sprayed and busted loose. I'm gonna do it to both sides, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so I got it loose. These ones were stuck on here pretty good, so I don't know where this vehicle came from originally, but it was on there pretty tight. So I sprayed it down with penetrating, and then I did have to add a little bit of heat because it would not break loose. But once you do that, just loosen it just a little bit to where you can undo your tie rod end. This side came off, no problem, but unfortunately this side did not. So I have to take this and I'm going to stick it, get in there, stick it back in the hole, and I'm going to take the wrench that fits the inner tie rod and I'm going to loosen it, see if I can't get it broke loose. So if not, then 2 pipe wrenches will work. So but best thing to do is always keep it in the cradle here, so that way you have the tension of it holding still instead of having to fight with it. So I'm going to get that undone so I can get this tie rod end off, and then we'll move to the next part. Okay, so finally got the tie rod off. You can see the rust build up, how bad it was. So now that I've got that tie rod end off, I wanted to tell you guys something, that these freaking tie rod pliers, for, I mean, basically any use, they're tie rod pliers, or Cornwell calls them a Swedish pipe plier, or you know, all kinds of different names for it, but these are fully adjustable and all that, and when you push on them they grip a lot harder. But these things are amazing. I tell you what, this is one of the best investments I've ever had, because not only can you use them on obviously tie rods, but you can use them on multiple applications. If you got a bolt that you can't get the right size on, you can set these on there and grip onto it and undo the bolt. I mean, there's multiple applications for these pliers. So if you can, get on, find you a pair of these and get them, because they're awesome. So anyways, we got the tie rod off. I'm gonna put these back. But I got the tie rod off. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to raise this up, and we're gonna get the drain pan underneath of it and undo the pressure and return lines for the power steering. Then we're going to pull the boot up and get the nut and bolt out of the steering shaft. So I'll bring you back when I get to that point. Okay, so we got the video, or the vehicle. Yeah, we got the video lifted up. No, we've got the vehicle lifted up. Now up here you're going to have, here's your supply and return lines. Sorry, it's one of the busy days on the highway. The farmers and everything are going back and forth to the grain bins. So, but right up here, see that yellow dot right there? You're gonna have, that should be an 11 millimeter. 90% of the time that's 11s. But we're gonna go ahead and take that out and let it sit and drain for a few minutes. And then while that's draining, I'm gonna go ahead and undo the boot, push the boot up so that way we can get to the bolt underneath of there. Okay, so that was actually a 10. So I believe that bolt's been changed out, or with this year they changed it to a 10 instead of an 11. For some godforsaken reason, they decided to change everything around on you. So it just gets more and more frustrating every year you work on. So anyways, once you get that loose, up top here, your line's going to be bound with either a 10 or an 8. So you want to undo that clamp there, which will be right there. Undo that, and then you'll be able to move the line out of the way and off to the side. So I'm going to get that undone, and then we will move to taking the boot off. Okay, so once you get your bolt out there, you push your line off to the side. Your other line's going to stay there until you come around to this side, and you have to undo this connector right here, which this connector, all it has is just a little push down, looks like a safety pin or a whatever you want to call it, paper clip, but it goes in right there. All you have to do is just push down on that, on this metal piece here, push down on it, pull backwards, tuck it off to the side, and then your other line comes down, and right there on the frame you'll have another 10 millimeter. So you undo that 10, and now this line is free to move around. So you'll have to come back around to the front here, pull your line out away from everything, shove it back there, and then you won't be able to pull it all the way through, but you can at least get it tucked up there out of the way so it's not hitting anything or getting in your way of everything. So take and scoot your drain pan over to where it's just at the edge, to where it's just barely dripping towards the corner, which I got it dripping right around in there, so that's close enough. But you're going to reach up here and just push your, okay, well, you're going to move the other line out of the way, but you're going to push the steering boot up just like that so you can get to that bolt right there. Now if you were taking the rack out and putting it back in the same rack, I would recommend putting an alignment mark, kind of like that green one right there they did from the factory. I would take and put an alignment mark of your own there somewhere, so that way you can ensure that when you put it back together everything's going to be the same. So, but thankfully these are keyed, so they'll only go on one way, but you still need to make sure that your steering and everything is straight, so that way there's no complications, no confusion, no nothing. So I'm going to go ahead and get that bolt out, and I'll let you know what size it is, all that, and we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so once you get that out, that bolt is actually an 11. That's the one I was thinking of earlier instead of this one here. That one up there is an 11. So once you get the bolt out, then you'll take a pry bar and you'll pry that up out of the socket. Sometimes it might be a little difficult to do, but don't get discouraged, because you can finagle it out of there once you start undoing the rest of this. So next we're going to move on to pulling the main bolts here. There's a nut up here. There's two of them. Where's the other one at? I believe the other one is underneath of this shield, so I'm going to have to drop that shield to be able to get to it, because it's either that or, oh nope, there's that, and oh come on, why do you guys make this so difficult? Alright, well, you've got a bolt and a nut here and a bolt and a nut here that hold this side in. Then there's another one on this side. I'll find it and I will let you guys know. Okay, so I found the other two bolts that hold the side together. You can see the bottoms of them up in here. There's one that comes in through this way and the other one comes from the top down. So the way I got it was you go in through here, you can get a swivel right into it right there. That's an 18 millimeter. These ones over here, because I didn't mention before, this one is 15/16 or a 24. 15/16 fits tighter, but you'll have 15/16, 15/16 bolt and nut, same going this way. Pull both of those out. Really long bolts. So, but you get those undone and then you move over here, and once you get that 18 out, then your other one's going to be hiding on top here. Let's get turned around just like that, and I got to get you fed up in there so you can see it, maybe somehow. It's right there. So not that one, that one. And in order to get to that, you have to take off. I'm trying to give you guys a better view, that way you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. That's a lot better. Okay, so the shield that's sitting here on top, come on, get out of my way, wiring. This shield right here, there's a 10 millimeter on top of it that'll sit right around it where that bump area is, right there at the tip of my finger. You'll have that 10 millimeter, and then there, if somebody hasn't taken it out already, there should be a 10 millimeter right here. But this one, somebody's already taken it out, so not a big deal. But you grab that shield and you pull that shield out, and then you can access your other 18 right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that shield out of the way, and we will, okay, I'm going to get the shield out of the way, and then once the shield's out of the way, then we will move to undoing that last 18 bolt, and then we're going to start getting that shaft pushed up out of the way, and I'll show you how to get this out of here the easiest way. So okay, so real quick, I did forget another thing to point out is there's usually a shield that sits right here. It looks like, get that one out of the way. It looks like this. It sits up in there like that. You have a 10 millimeter here, a 10 millimeter here, and then up above the drive shaft transfer case, there's a 10 millimeter there. So take those out, then you can see the bottom a whole lot easier. The way I look at it is, you know, if it looks like it's going to be in your way, get it out of your way. But if it's going to be too complicated to get out of your way, then there's always a way to find out how to get to it a lot easier. So I try to show you guys the easiest ways that I possibly can. Granted, there's people out there that know different ways. Everybody does things differently. So anyways, I'm going to get that undone and shoved up out of the way, along with the 18 millimeter over here, and then we'll start getting that rack finagled out of there. Okay, so once you get this out of the way, get your shaft pushed up and out of the way, then you can shove the rack that way. You'll lift up this end just to make sure it's loose, and then you're always going to take it out, at least in my opinion and the way I've always done it, you're always going to take it out the driver's side because it's the easiest. To get it out, you're going to have to pull your power steering line that's on the side here. You're going to have to put a bungee cord on it and pull it all the way to the left, or to the front of the vehicle. Once you get that done, then you're going to have to slide the rack towards you, and then you're going to twist it so that way that the upper shaft area here, see if I can get in there, get out of my way. This upper shaft area where the steering shaft comes down in, you're going to have to take it and twist it towards the transmission. So you're going to have to do that on top of lifting up the back, so you'll have to kind of teeter-totter it to be able to fit through this opening. It sounds worse than it actually is, but it's not that bad. So, but once you get it twisted and pulled out this side, whatever you do, try your hardest not to pull on these, because then that'll move the alignment of the rack, and then it's a pain in the butt getting everything lined back up to make sure that it's correct. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and get it out of there because I can't do it with the camera in my hand, and I apologize. I'm trying my hardest to get new equipment so that way I can make better videos, but of course I'm just starting out, so getting this information to you guys is part of what I like doing. And on top of that, you know, I want to make sure I have the equipment to be able to show you guys. So I'm going to get it out of there, and then I'll show you how to make sure you get everything lined up with the new rack and everything. So okay, so another thing I wanted to point out is you can take off the catalytic converter. This is a V6, so you don't have as much room as the 4 cylinders or anything like that, but you have, I believe they're 15s, they might be 14s, but you have a nut there, there's a nut on the side right there, and then there's one on the other side. You take those 3 off, and then you come over here and you've got one, which this has already been changed out, one bolt nut here, which could be just a bolt nut, whatever, and then you have another one right there. So my suggestion is if you're going to do that and you're gonna take it out, which I recommend it, number one, make sure the vehicle's not extremely hot. Number two, make sure you have replacement bolts in case they break, because it is a very high possibility that they could break depending on where you live. So I recommend spraying them down just to let them soak. That way they come out a lot easier. But have some replacement nuts and bolts ready for when you do take that out, because there's always a possibility, there's always a chance that they will break. So just go ahead and take that out, and that way that'll allow the back end here of the rack to lift up, and you can actually move that end of it down to be able to fit through the hole a lot easier, because if not, you're gonna fight with it. And that was one thing I meant to say, but I apologize. So you live and you learn. So we're gonna get the converter out, and then we'll move on to that piece. Okay, so another thing I wanted to add is when you go to take your exhaust out and the catalytic converter out, these are hard to get to, and sometimes they're almost impossible, it feels like, to get off of there. So what I'm doing is I've disconnected the exhaust here, and I've disconnected it up here at the front catalytic converter. Now I'm going to pull this shield off, which is 415s. It goes all the way across. It does not support anything. It's just a protection shield. And that'll allow me to get this section here all the way up to there, dropped out and off to the side. You do have two O2 sensors. There's one right here that goes up and plugs into, where's it at? Right here. Yep, right there. And then the other one in the back plugs into the harness right here, which in this case it was just laying there, so I don't know where it'll be on yours. It'll be around in that area. Just look for the foil covered line. So undo both of those, and then you'll be able to undo the that cross plate right here. So I'm going to get the cross plate out and we'll get the exhaust dropped, and then we can get in there and get to those two bolts on the bottom of the converter. Okay, so once you have that done, you get up in here and you've got your cross pipe out. Then of course it'll look like that if you have a V6. If you have the 4-cylinder, the setup is going to be completely different. So I would have to do another video on one when I get a 4-cylinder in. So, but now you're able to get up in there and get to, well, get my light out of the way and around here. Now you can get to your 2 bolts on the bottom right there for the converter. So you get those bolts out and then you can pull the converter back. I do recommend replacing the gaskets if you do this, because there's always a possibility that it's going to leak, and of course nobody wants a noisy exhaust. So they're standard 2-bolt flange, so you'll have to have 1, 2, and then your third one for up here. The one for the converter is going to be a 3-bolt. It'll be converter to manifold. This will be converter to flex pipe, and then of course same there and same there, because this one and that one are the same size, and so is that one. So you'll just need 3 of them, and it'll make it a whole lot easier to get in there and do your stuff. So, ew, that don't look too happy. Oh, so, okay, anyways, I'm gonna get the bolt out of the bottom of there, and we'll move on to getting the rack shoved to the side. Okay, so one thing that I had forgot to take into mind, and I do apologize, is the height of these steering rack gear sections here, the pinion section, because they're so tall, they will not fit through here very easily. So what I can recommend is we're going to drop this back into the subframe. To do that, all you have to do is support either both sides or one side, but you can drop just this driver's side down to be able to get the rack to come out. Don't worry, the engine itself and the transmission are both attached to the frame, so except for on this one. Oh, good lord. Okay, so yes, you do have one right there, but as long as you keep it suspended, you know, keep something underneath of here, then when you lower the subframe down in the back, then you'll be just fine being able to put it back up in there. Biggest thing is make sure you support it, because if not, then you're going to have a whole lot of problems, potentially cause somebody to get hurt or yourself get hurt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get my stands underneath it here so I can support it, and then I might say screw it and go ahead and get the tranny jack sitting over there and get it under here with my boards, and we'll just lower the whole thing down at once, which might be the easiest way to do it for me. For you guys out there that are doing this, you know, in your garage or on the ground, that don't have these tools. Easiest way I can recommend to do this is put a jack underneath of right here, underneath of the control arm area, and then that way you can undo your bolt here, your bracket here, and then you'll have another bolt and bracket on this front. You'll loosen them slowly, because if for some chance you don't have it on or sitting in the correct spot, then sorry, my mind's all over the place today, so my speech and everything is all screwed up, so I do apologize. Anyways, you have the bolt and bracket front, bolt and bracket rear. Right here in the middle, put your jack, so that way you can hold it up, because you should have jack stands underneath of here and here to support that if you're doing this on the ground. Thankfully, I'm fortunate enough to have a lift. Like I said, not everybody has one. Anyways, back to the subject at hand. My editor's probably going to be all mad at me for doing all this. But anyways, you're going to undo those bolts after you get your jack underneath of there. I'm going to use the tranny jack for me, because it's a whole lot easier to support everything. We'll get this side drop down a little bit, and we should be able to get the rack to slide out this way and down. So I'll get that done, and we'll get it to where you can see where I get this to slide out. Okay, so I've taken out 1, 2 on that bracket, which those are 15s, and then we move to the front here. We've got 2 up front, those are 15s. These are 22s, and like I said in the last part, take these out slowly, so that way you can make sure that you have this set correctly, because I've just got mine set right in the middle there. You'll take this one down a little bit, then you go back and take that one down a little bit, and vice versa. You'll keep working your way. So, okay, so we got it out of there. One thing I did have to do is I did have to support this other side of the subframe and lower it down a little bit, just so that way I could have enough room to get that out. As you can see, I'll get my bar out of there because I didn't need it. As you can see, there's enough room for me to fit my hand in there, but that's about it. So you don't need a whole lot of room, but you need more than what they supply. So the way I did it is I turned it, lifted it all the way up to where this was facing straight up, and then this section was able to slide out and around the transmission. So anyways, now that we've got it out, we're going to set this next to the new one, and we're going to line up our nut spacing with the one on the new one. I'll show you a couple different ways to do that. So we'll get this over there and we'll show you how to do this. Okay, so once you got your new one sitting next to your old one, what you're going to do is you're going to take a tape measure, and you're going to measure from the very tip of, come on, get on there, the very tip to where the threads end, and that's going to be roughly 2 2/16, I believe. And we're going to measure here, and dang it, come on. So the threads on the new one are longer, so they're at a little over 2 1/4. Okay, so we figured out that the threads on the new one are longer than the threads on this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure from the very tip to the cup base right here, where the end of the boot comes up. same on this one. We'll measure from here to where the boot starts and see what the length is on those. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. So from the boot to there is 7 inches. And from the boot to there is, yep, same, 7 inches, even though it's turned. So what we will do is I'm going to measure from the boot to where the nut, gosh dang it. Okay, so I'll measure from there to the boot. This is just to get a rough area, because we're going to send it to have it aligned afterwards, but which I always recommend. So we're looking at 5 1/4. So basically I need to go from there to 5 1/4 and make a line on those threads right there. So I'm going to do that real quick and bring it back. Okay, so after you get that measured and your line made, I went ahead and did it on both sides, so they're marked. We're going to take the nut off of here and transfer it over to there, and then we'll put our tie rod ends on, and then we're going to move over to this rack is electronic assist. The electronic assist motor is inside the vehicle, up underneath of the dash, attached to the steering. So the only way that you can tell is, number one, looking under the dash. If you see a giant motor underneath of there, then there's your inclination. But on these ones, there's a pressure valve. It's a torque pressure valve that basically tells the computer how hard of a turning force you're using to be able to turn, so it can then multiply that force to make it easier. So but I'm going to go ahead and transfer the nuts over, and then we'll get to pulling the pressure sensor, and we're going to put it on the new one. So okay, one more thing to check when you before you go putting this back in there, or even think about putting it back in there, is you got to make sure, dang fly, you got to make sure that your steering shaft is straight and your output here the same as here, because you knew when you took this one out it was straight, so you got to make sure this is straight also and centered. So the way that I do that is, again, tape measure. You're going to take and you're going to measure from a fixed point on the body of it. So I'm going to go right there is where I normally go. I already measured it. It was 14.5 from this point here to the end. And then on this one it was 14.5 to that end. So and then also check on the other end. Do not go off of these mounts here and here, because they move. Always check at the body itself. So if you have to, check from the screw in fitting to the end, or somewhere that's a solid mount made as part of the cylinder or the housing. So that way you get an accurate measurement. So that's one good way to adjust it and make sure it's centered. So, and if you have to, take a crescent wrench or adjustable wrench, whatever, put it on there and you can turn it either way you need to be able to get it to set center. So now we're going to put our tie rod ends on, and then I'm going to switch over the torque valve, and then we'll get to setting her back up in there and putting everything back together. So okay, so if by chance you do have the electronic assist, then you're going to have to swap over your torque valve or torque sensor. Those are easy. It's 4 bolts around the edge, and they're actually little hex head bolts like this. They're extremely tiny, extremely made of aluminum, and they don't need to be cranked down. They don't have to be tight as can be. So they are 5s on there. The let's see, yep, 5s, Allen head, hex head, whatever you want to call them. So, but basically, just pull those. That plate comes off the new one. You take your old one, obviously go clean it up because you don't want to put it on there while it's still dirty. So I'm going to do that real quick, but you know, the new ones come with O-rings already in there. So all you have to do is just set your new or your clean valve back on the new one or onto the new one, and then tighten them down. Like I said, again, do not over tighten these, because if you over tighten them, then you could snap one off and then it leaks and then it's a pain and then you can't get it warranted. So they don't have to be super tight, they just have to be super sealed. So I'm gonna go clean this valve up real quick, and then I'll bring you back when we go to install it. Okay, so I got her all cleaned up, as best I could. Inside of the center hole right there, there is a filter. Do not try to pull that filter out. Just make sure it's cleaned and whatnot, but do not try to pull it out. So, just a heads up, tech tip, whatever you want to call it. So, now we're just going to take this, I'm going to set it right down on top. We're going to put our bolts in there and tighten them down, and then we'll move on to the reinstallation of the entire unit. Okay, so we got the valve on there. Like I said, it is super easy to strip these things out, so be extremely careful. What I like to do after I get these on, anytime I mess with anything steering wise like this, is I will take and put a line, so that way I know that's where that one is. Put a line down through here. Come on. There we go. Okay, that one's a little messed up, but there. Oh well. And then I'll come around to the other side, and I'll put. There. I'll put. Come on. There we go. Put a line on it. Same with. I'll do that to all 4 of them, and that's so that way I know that where I have tightened them, they have not moved. So once that's done, then we're going to move on to the reinstallation. We're going to move on to the reinstallation, darn trucks, of the unit. So we're going to get it stuck back up in there. Reinstallation, whatever you want to call it. We're going to shove it back in the hole and start getting everything buckled back up, and then we'll move back to the clearing of the air and all that fancy stuff that you do afterwards, and then I'll show you a little tip on how to make sure that everything's straight. So okay, so after fighting, cussing, yelling, screaming, beating, shaking, doing the mamba, everything, it will finally go back in there. So once you get it back in there, then all you have to do is go through, put your bolts back in to hold it, and get everything lined back up, Now that the exhaust is out of the way, you can get to these bolts a whole lot easier. But get your main bolts all put back in real quick, and then we'll move on to reattaching the steering sleeve, or steering shaft and sleeve, and then next part, so on and so forth. Okay, so once you get your main bolts in and the nuts and everything, get everything tightened down, put your 18s in over here. Biggest thing you want to remember is what I said earlier, which was these brackets right here, they do move. So when you go to put these back in, they might not line up with your holes. So you're probably going to have to either pry it or push it. But whatever you do, don't push on these, on your inner or outer tie rods at all. Grab the body of it, move it, use a pry bar, press it whichever way you need to, but you don't want to throw it out of line. Another thing I would suggest is with the steering shaft that comes out of the top up here. When you get the new one and you get it lined up correctly, make you a mark just like we did on the bolts. Make an alignment mark on there. So that way when you go back up in there, if by chance it does move, then you can double check and make sure it's back in the same spot by the time you get ready to put the steering shaft, or the steering column shaft back on it. So, but after you get those bolts in, then you go through and you'll put your brackets back on, put your 15s in, put your 22s back in, go through and tighten everything down, make sure it all lines up. If you're having trouble with it lining up, there are alignment holes right here. They go all the way up through to line everything up. That's the way they do it from the factory, and it makes sense for everybody to use them if they need to. So, but you'll go through, you'll get everything tightened up, all that hoopla, blah, blah, blah. Then you can get your jack stands out of the way or whatever you got holding it up there. Get that stuff moved out of the way, and then after we get that done, we're going to move to rerouting the lines back to where they need to be, getting the electrical plugged in, and then we will start putting the exhaust back on, and then the bottom shield. So I'll go ahead and record all that just so that way in case there's something that you guys want to learn or want to know, then I'll be able to explain it. But for those who are happy and satisfied that they know that they can put it all back together the same way that it came apart, then I appreciate you watching the video all this way. If you can, please like, subscribe, and every little bit counts. Like I've told everybody else, you know, it's it's not a good day unless you learn something new. So thanks everybody, have a good day. Okay, so we got the bolt up in there, or not the bolt, god dang it, we got the frame attached, everything like that. Now we're gonna put the we put the steering shaft on, and it lined right up. So one thing is when you go to put this bolt back in, wherever it's at, there it is. When you go to put this bolt back in, put a little bit of Loctite on it. I use red Loctite, but they use blue from the factory. You can use either, as long as you never ever ever use green. Do not use green, for the love of God. So anyways, I'm going to put some Loctite on here and get this started in here, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so I got a little bit of Loctite on there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's the really shiny stuff. So, but you just need a little bit. You don't need a whole lot. You can get it stuck up in there in the hole. Get it. Sometimes you may have to raise or lower the shaft just to get it to go all the way through. But once you do get it to go all the way through, You'll know it. Come on. Okay, well, I'm going to get that pushed through and get it started, and then we'll get her tightened down, pull the boot back over it. We'll move the power steering line back around, and we'll bring the other one down from up top, and we'll replace the O-rings. Every time you do this, or anytime you mess with anything that has no ring in it, replace the O-ring. If not, then you have a potential of a leak. Nobody wants a leak. So, okay. So we got that tightened down. Now what we're going to do is... Oh my God, dropped my light. Yep, that's exactly what we're going to do. Anyways. Oh, for God's sakes, come on. Stay up there. Really? Stay. Oh, good God. Okay, fine. I'll put you right here then. There. Alright, so you get that on, you get that tightened down. Now we're going to reach back here, wherever it's hiding. Okay, maybe I got it tucked. Oh yeah, it's tucked over here. That's right, I forgot I bungee corded it. So pull your bungee cord off, take and feed you're gonna have to feed your line back through and back around everything just like that. And like I said, peel your old O-ring off the end of this and put a new one on. Almost all of the racks that you buy will come with a set of new O-rings, just like this set did. It's got some right here for the smaller and bigger lines. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace the O-rings on those, and we'll go to tightening down that line. Okay, so once you get your O-rings replaced, you get your lines fed back in there, you can go ahead and tighten down your 10. Biggest thing I want to point out is this bigger line here has a nylon washer in it. Leave that on there. Do not mess with that. But once you get your O-rings swapped and you get everything set in there and you get it tightened down, then next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the clamp back on that line. Then we're going to move over here and we're going to put the shield back on top of this side. Get that out of the way. Which the shield attaches to this. So we'll get that put back on, and then we'll get the exhaust put back up in there, and then we can move over. Another thing is do not forget to plug in your dang light there. Don't forget to plug in your connector right here. Biggest thing to remember is you've got that push piece right there. If you push that down as you're pushing this on, then it's a whole lot easier to go on, and that way it won't come back off. So don't forget your plug-in. And that's only for the ones with electronic assist. So standard power steering, all that, you don't have those. So but I'm gonna go ahead. Oh, forgot to pull the boot down. Yeah, don't forget to pull your boot down. If not, you're gonna get a whole bunch of dirt and stuff in there, and that tears up the seals. So all right, next we're gonna go ahead and put the shield back on, like I said, and move on to the exhaust. All right, so one thing I wanted to remind you of is don't forget to put your bolt in that line retainer there, and the clip right there. You want to get those in just to make sure that the line doesn't move or chafe against anything else. So, all right, now we're going to move on to putting the shield in and then the exhaust. So, okay, so unfortunately you have to put the Gotta let converter in before you put the shield in up there, because if not, then you can't get to your bottom bolts on the converter. So I went ahead and put the converter on. Real easy, 215 zip, new gaskets, and then put the new shield, or the top shield, on top of the rack, and 10mm zip, done. Then go ahead and put your bottom shield on right here. 3 10s, 1, 2, and then 3. Get those in, zip, done. So next we got the exhaust. We're gonna throw the exhaust up in there, new gaskets, get everything tightened down, and then we'll put the bottom cross brace back on, which is 4 15s. So we'll get that done real quick, and then we'll move on to tightening everything down. Okay, so once you have your exhaust on with all your new gaskets, all that stuff, you got everything tightened down. You want to make sure that everything, go through, double check, triple check, freaking quintuple check, whatever. Make sure nothing is loose. Make sure that you got every point tightened down. Make sure your connectors are in, make sure your lines are secure, make sure that the steering nut is tight, all of that. I mean, go through and triple check yourself. If you're not sure and you want to be sure, then double check it. So now that we've got everything tightened down, and I know that I've tightened everything down, the last thing that we have is our tie rod ends. We've got to put the nut on the bottom of here. So there's a little trick that I want to put out there for everybody, and this is before somebody puts a video out there so I can say, haha, I did it first. No, I'm just kidding. If you get a point to where this goes on here and it continues to spin, there's a couple ways that you can fix that. Number one is, when you get it stuck down in the socket, take your pry bar and stick it in between, and get this shoved back in here. Stick it on the top of this and stick it under, shove it underneath of the CV axle there, and pry down. That is one trick. That'll hold, and then hold pressure down, so that way your nut will suck up to it. Another way is, if it continues to spin after that, you take and right here around the outer edge of the hole, number one, you want to make sure there's no grease or anything in it. But number two is, you want to take a punch and you want to knock notches into this around this edge. That's going to give the shaft here something to bite to. So when you put this down in the hole and it meets those notches, then you take your hammer and just give it a nice tap, and then hold down with your pry bar, and it won't go anywhere. So hopefully that helps somebody. If not, well, I'm sorry. There's other ways to get it on there, but I can only do so much. I apologize. So, but we're gonna go ahead and get this stuck in here, and we'll get the nut tightened down, we'll get the other side tightened down, we'll get the tires on it, and then I'll show you another trick to make sure that you're aligned up. So, okay, so we got tie rods on, got the tires tightened down. One of the biggest things is, when you go to do this, I've learned this a long time ago from old boy. Take that, and go from your center over there, stretch all the way over to this side, and you measure your center here. So we're at 66 on that center line. So now you move to the front and you measure from center to center, and we're at 68.5. So that means that the front is too far out, the back is too far in. So we need to make this to where it measures the same or close to the same front and rear, and that'll be centered. So what we're going to do is I'm going to measure from the frame rail here to the tire on the back, and then on this side from the frame rail to the tire on this side, and I'll see how far off both sides are, because I want to try and get it as centered as possible since we replaced both sides. So I'm going to do that and we'll find out where we're at. Okay, so after you get everything lined up as close as you can and you move up to the top, your power steering reservoir is going to be located underneath of your engine cover. Once you get that pulled off and you get your cap undone, I'm doing it this way because it goes a lot faster, but not everybody's going to have access to a vacuum pump and all that to be able to pull the air out while the fluid drops down in its place. So the easiest way to do this, if you don't have a vacuum pump, is put fluid in it, fill it up, and then have somebody sit inside the vehicle and start it real quick, and as they're starting it, pour fluid in it so that way it can pull all that fluid down in, and you'll just basically fill it up until it's full, and then you'll move the steering wheel to the right. If you're sitting in the vehicle, you're going to turn it to the right, shut the vehicle off, let the air bubbles pop out, give it, I'd probably say about 2-3 minutes, start it again, move it to the left, shut it off, another couple minutes, start it up, do it again to the right side. Once you're done with that, check and make sure your fluid level's correct and all that, and take it for a test drive. So, but one thing you got to remember is make sure you get this aligned, because the alignment procedure that I showed you is not always going to be 100% on. So nowadays everybody has the digital and all that, so they're able to get it like within a micrometer of a freaking inch. So have it aligned, that way you're not tearing anything else up. So, but that's pretty much the entire process. So I appreciate the people that have followed me through the entire video, who have watched the entire video. If you can, hit that thumbs up, like, subscribe, all that hoopla. All of that's appreciated. So, like I say in every video, it's not a good day unless you've learned something new. Thanks everybody. Have a good day.